China's government has reportedly ordered its domestic airlines to stop accepting deliveries of Boeing jets and to halt purchases of aircraft parts from the U.S.
A major shakeup tonight at Boeing after a string of scary incidents involving the aircraft. The company's CEO announcing today he will step down.
Two overnight machinists at Boeing here in St. Louis are operating without a contract agreement.
Workers have voted down a recent offer, and the current agreement expired at midnight.
The warning signs did not appear on factory gates. They appeared in contracts, supply agreements, and quiet corporate filings. As Boeing began shifting critical aerospace work out of the United States and into Canada, the consequences moved faster than the headlines. Jobs once assumed to be untouchable suddenly looked fragile. Communities built around aircraft manufacturing felt the ground shift beneath them. And in Washington, the reaction was explosive, with Donald Trump accusing Boeing of abandoning American workers as the reality of disappearing jobs set in. For decades, aerospace was treated as one of America's safest industrial strongholds, too strategic to lose, too deeply tied to national security and technological leadership to drift beyond U.S. borders. Boeing was not just another corporation. It was a symbol of American engineering, manufacturing power, and global dominance. That assumption is now being tested. Over recent months, Boeing has quietly restructured key parts of its supply chain, expanding its reliance on Canadian aerospace firms for high-value work. This was not a single decision or a sudden exit. It was a gradual shift, executed through long-term agreements that redirected specialized manufacturing, systems integration, and maintenance programs north of the border. For workers in places like Washington State, Kansas, and Missouri, the concern was immediate. Aerospace jobs are not easily replaced. They require years of training, support entire local economies, and often anchor multiple generations of employment. When that kind of work begins to move, the effects ripple far beyond the factory floor. This shift did not happen in a vacuum. It unfolded against the backdrop of escalating trade tensions and policy decisions that reshaped the economics of aircraft manufacturing inside the United States. Donald Trump made aerospace a central pillar of his industrial message. At rallies and press events, he promised that tariffs would protect American workers and force corporations to keep production at home. The argument was straightforward: make foreign components more expensive, and companies will have no choice but to deepen domestic manufacturing. In 2024, that message turned into policy. The administration expanded tariffs on imported aircraft components, presenting the move as a way to secure jobs, stabilize wages, and reinforce American dominance in advanced manufacturing. Officials argued that domestic supply chains would strengthen and that companies like Boeing would respond by investing more heavily inside the United States. On paper, the strategy appeared tough and decisive. In practice, aerospace manufacturing operates under very different constraints. Aircraft programs are planned decades. Cost stability, regulatory predictability, and uninterrupted supply chains matter more than short-term political signals. Even modest increases in uncertainty can disrupt programs worth tens of billions of dollars. As tariff pressure increased, Boeing faced a difficult reality. Absorbing higher costs domestically risked squeezing margins and delaying production schedules. Passing those costs on to airlines threatened competitiveness. The alternative was diversification, spreading risk across locations where costs and trade rules were more predictable. Canada offered exactly that. Unlike the volatile trade environment facing U.S. manufacturers, Canada positioned itself as a stable, low-risk partner. Its aerospace sector had spent years building capacity, supported by public investment, skilled labor pipelines, and close coordination between industry and government. Quebec and Ontario, in particular, already housed globally integrated aerospace clusters capable of handling complex, high-value work. According to Reuters reporting, Boeing has been actively adjusting its supply chain to manage rising costs and reduce exposure to trade disruptions, a strategy that includes expanding operations with trusted partners in countries offering regulatory stability and predictable trade conditions. When Canadian firms secured expanded roles in Boeing's operations, the political response in Washington was immediate. Trump publicly criticized the move, framing it as a betrayal of American workers and warning that retaliation remained on the table. His reaction underscored how central aerospace had become to the broader narrative of economic nationalism. But analysts following the industry noted that Boeing's decision was not ideological. It was structural. High-value aerospace contracts do more than generate revenue. They create technical expertise, attract long-term investment, and lock in future production pathways. Once that ecosystem forms, reversing it becomes extremely difficult. That is why the shift triggered alarm across labor unions and manufacturing communities. For American workers, the fear is not mass layoffs tomorrow. It is something slower and harder to fight: a gradual decline, fewer new programs, reduced expansion, skills and investment flowing elsewhere over time. History has shown that once advanced manufacturing begins to drift, it rarely snaps back quickly. AP News has repeatedly highlighted how trade uncertainty influences corporate behavior, especially in industries dependent on long-term planning. Companies operating in high-precision manufacturing often prioritize predictability over proximity when faced with volatile policy environments. In Canada, the reaction was markedly different. Officials framed Boeing's shift as proof that long-term industrial planning works. Canadian leaders emphasized the role of political stability, workforce development, and coordinated research investment. Universities and aerospace research centers anticipate increased collaboration, deeper funding, and greater global visibility. For Ottawa, this moment was not presented as a victory over the United States, but as validation of a strategy built around consistency rather than confrontation. The contrast sharpened political tensions south of the border. Democrats argued that the situation exposed the unintended consequences of rigid trade policies, warning that tariffs alone cannot secure modern supply chains. Some Republicans, particularly those representing aerospace-dependent districts, expressed growing unease. They worry that continued shifts abroad could weaken voter confidence in regions where manufacturing jobs remain central to economic survival. Beyond North America, the implications extend further. Global competitors are watching closely. Airbus and emerging aerospace manufacturers in Asia have long sought opportunities to expand their influence. Any instability in Boeing's production strategy creates openings for rivals to strengthen partnerships and capture future contracts. At a deeper level, the situation raises uncomfortable questions about how industrial leadership is maintained in a globalized economy. Tariffs were designed to create leverage, but leverage depends on predictability. When policy introduces uncertainty, corporations respond rationally, even if those responses contradict political promises. For Boeing, the shift reflects risk management. For Canada, it represents strategic opportunity. For American workers, it revives familiar anxieties about whether political assurances translate into lasting security. As the 2025 election cycle intensifies, the symbolism of this moment grows heavier. Aerospace was supposed to be protected. Instead, it has become a case study in how quickly industrial assumptions can be challenged. What is unfolding now is not just a dispute over contracts or borders. It is a signal of how industrial power is quietly being redistributed, not through dramatic announcements, but through careful, calculated decisions made far from campaign stages. And once those decisions are made, reversing them becomes far more difficult than stopping them in the first place.